Good evening, people loved by God. Thank you so much for having us. It's a real privilege to be with you. And, I'll just need to restart this, I think. Does that look a bit better? Good. Yeah, a real privilege to be with you this evening. It's always good when God's people together. And greetings from our church too in St Albans Baptist over near Cranford Street. And just to say we haven't come from a long, long way. My wife and I drove about 2 minutes to get here tonight. We live in Bourne Crescent, just off Harris Crescent, so we're locals. So today I want to pose the question: what does every pilot need to know to stay alive that you also need to know to help save lives? But first up, a warning. This talk is not intended just to tickle your ears or stimulate you intellectually. It's intended to result in action. You have been warned. That was my stern voice, by the way. I love science, and for me it was really exciting when I began to discover that science had not disproved the Bible, and in fact supports what's written in it. All it took for me was access to good information. So while I'm not formally trained as a scientist, I've been an avid user of science, especially physics, in a context where getting it wrong can have really serious consequences. I'm referring to my involvement in aviation, which includes the maintenance of big aeroplanes, specifically jet engines, as an aircraft engineer, as Penny said, for 40 years now. And we like to say that without us, it's just a big glider. And I've been flying small ones as a hobby for a wee bit less than that. But this evening I'm representing a global organisation called Creation Ministries International. It exists to build the faith of Christians, to give them confidence in God's Word, and to encourage them in sharing their faith with other people. We describe this as arming God's army. And we're effectively an information ministry to the church. We focus on the Bible, and in particular the book of Genesis at the beginning of the Bible, because this is the book most under attack by those seeking to discredit the Bible. The greatest weapon in that attack has been the theory of evolution. So tonight I want to look at three things. Firstly, I want to show you why this issue really does matter. Secondly, we'll look at a bit of evidence supporting the creation account in the Bible. And thirdly, we'll look at what we can do to make a difference. But back to aviation. Flying is an incredible privilege that allowed me to do some really fun things, like this. Stalling an aircraft is very different to stalling a car. It can result in a spin, which unnerves some passengers because you end up pointing straight at the ground, going round and round. But it's perfectly safe if carried out at altitude, and that was on purpose. But aviation isn't all fun and games. Pilots do have to make some tough decisions at times. Like this guy. On the one hand, it was a $20 million aircraft. On the other hand, the spider was inside the cockpit. Flying comes with a warning. It's highly addictive. Linda will tell you I spend way too much of my time looking skyward and wishing I was up there. But up there isn't always a good place to be. There is a truism in aviation that says it's better to be down here wishing you were up there than to be up there wishing you were down here. It's very true. The chances are, if you find yourself up there wishing you were down here, it's because of something you didn't do or you didn't know before you even took off. It's highly likely that it's because you weren't fully prepared or equipped in some way. The pilot must prepare in advance for every expected part of the flight ahead, but also for the unexpected things that may occur. It's no use finding yourself in the middle of a spin unexpectedly and then trying to read the flight manual to find out how to get out of spin. That's not going to work well for you. You need to have done that ahead of time. It's all about preparation. Now the same is true for all of us here tonight. We need to be prepared and equipped ahead of time. We all have conversations, and hopefully we do, where people raise questions about Christianity and the Bible. How do you go when you're in that position? The Apostle Peter in the Bible has some advice for us in this regard, where he tells us to always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that you have. How well prepared are you? What will you say when your teenager comes home and says, we learned all about evolution at school today and how it works? Or your workmate might say, how can you deny evolution? The fossils prove it. Or what if your neighbour said to you, how can there be a God when there's so much suffering in the world? Will you stammer something unconvincing and wish you were down there, not up here? Or will you give a confident, intelligent response? These conversations are great opportunities to have a real impact in someone's life. I want to tell you that it's possible to give solid answers that make sense, that cause non-Christian people to think, maybe it isn't all myth and wishful thinking after all. Maybe I should find out more. All you need is to get your hands on the right information, and you'll find that there are sensible answers to virtually every question or objection. So the first reason that the evolution versus creation issue matters is that we need to be prepared for conversations around this topic, able to defend our faith. Not just so that we can feel more confident, but so we can be fruitful and effective. We've been called to be salt and light in this world, to make a difference. And we're surrounded by lost people in desperate need of help and direction. The second reason that this discussion matters is that the Bible is under attack. The theory of evolution is the greatest and most successful attack on the Bible there has ever been, and we read daily in the media about the tragic results of abandoning the biblical worldview. Some, even in the church, think that the creation-evolution debate is a sideshow. It's not worth focusing on. But I want to tell you that for those outside the church looking in, it's not a side issue at all. It's very much what they're focused on. Evolution is the greatest reason given by people outside the church why they don't believe the Bible. You may be surprised to learn that this issue affects the core message of the Bible, salvation, Jesus' death on the cross. So don't let anyone tell you this is a side issue. Another reason why this is important, I have a question for you. Where did you come from? I want to suggest to you that when you boil it all down, there are three really big questions that we all face regarding our time on this planet. The ultimate questions of life, you could call them. Number one, where did I come from? What's my origin? Number two, why am I here? What's my purpose in life? And number three, where am I going next? Or what happens when I die? I also want to suggest to you that your answers to questions 2 and 3 depend entirely on how you answer question 1. If life started randomly and we evolved with no creator, then your time on this planet has no meaning, no ultimate purpose, and when you die, that's it. End of story, job done. Our children are taught this worldview, and then we wonder why the youth suicide rate is so high. I'm sure you'll agree it's tragic, but unsurprising. Following the Columbine High School massacre in 1999, where 12 students and 1 teacher lost their lives, the school superintendent asked why such an atrocity had occurred. Pastor and police chaplain Gino Geraci gave the following reply. He said, "You have taught our children that they come from nowhere, that that's where they're going, and that life is a point of pain and a meaningless existence." And they believed you. Am I drawing an unwarranted connection here between evolutionary teaching and horrific acts of violence? I don't think so. Creation Ministries article at the time highlighted how one of the killers wore a t-shirt emblazoned with natural selection, that both young men were obsessed with Darwinism and Nazism. Our young people are not stupid. If we tell them that they are nothing more than rearranged pond scum, then they will come to the entirely logical conclusion that they have no more value than pond scum, and they will act accordingly. And we're seeing this. The evolution issue matters. It's not just an interesting intellectual discussion. Lives really are at stake. To put it another way, ideas have consequences, and bad ideas have bad consequences. So arguably the question, where did I come from, is the most important question that we can ask. A little girl was facing this question, and so she asked her father, where did the human race come from? The father answered, God made Adam and Eve, they had children, their children had children, and all humans are descended from them. 2 days later, the little girl asked her mother the same question. But her mother answered, well, many years ago, the human race evolved from monkeys. The confused girl returned to her father and said, Dad, I don't get it. You told me that God created the human race, and Mum says we evolved from monkeys. The father wisely answered, well, dear, it's very simple. I told you about my side of the family, and your mother told you about hers. Obviously not a real story, but if you were that father, could you give logical answers to your daughter supporting your statement that God created humans with solid evidence? It really could impact her eternity. Can you see how our answer to the question, where do they come from, does matter? One final reason why this matters. I have some sobering information for you regarding our young people going off to university. You need to understand that university is far from neutral. Virtually every subject is toxic to Christianity. Australian Students for Christ chaplain Craig Tasker noted, the institution's philosophy of education is secular humanism. Thus, students are bombarded with it in every lecture as the basic assumption. This constant brainwashing destroys the faith of many Christians each year. He says, our surveys indicate that 80% of first-year students believe in a God who is there. By their second year, only 15% believe in God. Fallout. It's a powerful DVD produced by Creation Ministries in which uni students in the USA were interviewed about the teaching they received as a young person. Every single student who said they were raised in the church but no longer attends church said they now believe evolution to be a scientific fact. The interview showed clearly that the majority of young people not exposed to creation teaching in their youth now embrace evolution and no longer attend church. Yet, listen to this. Every student spoken to who was equipped with answers about evolution as a young person still retains their Christian convictions, in spite of the evolutionary teaching they received in higher education. Better still, every single student spoken to who affirmed biblical creation still attends church regularly. It's a powerful DVD. I'll tell you a bit later on how you can get hold of a free copy. Really pleased to be able to tell you too that we have a new resource specifically written to prepare our young people for going to university. This booklet is very cheap, $4.50. In my opinion, it's essential reading for anyone at or going to university. So, having established that this issue is important, how can we get prepared to respond to questions and challenges? How can we equip our families? Probably the easiest way is the free Info Bites email newsletter produced by Creation Ministries. These regular emails keep you right up to date with the latest information and news. Did I mention it was free? Info Bites is not limited just to science-related topics, but addresses all sorts of recent news and topical issues. It's a great resource that costs you nothing. So if you'd like a regular supply of encouraging articles and biblical perspectives on the latest discoveries, just add your details to the sign-up sheet that's going to circulate now. If you can add your postcode, it helps us to tailor the information for your area, and your phone number can help us if the email address is illegible. It's that easy. You're getting equipped to make a difference. The other free resource is the Creation Ministries website. The web address is a toughie, creation.com. The amount of information you'll find there is staggering. It has a great search engine too. You'll find over 10,000 articles, everything imaginable on the creation evolution debate, as well as many articles supporting the Bible as God's Word. Around 700 video clips, many only about a minute long, a new front page article every day, Monday through Saturday. And we now have resources in over 40 different languages, including Chinese. A teenage schoolgirl found she never had answers to her questions, but after finding our website, she says, I was surprised to find the answers to the questions I've been asking for over 10 years, and literally the first day I was at your site. It helped me realise that true faith and intelligence aren't mutually exclusive. A few months later, I became a Christian. How awesome is that? The power of being informed. So, where did the idea of millions of years of Earth history come from? Well, people looked at the huge depth of sedimentary layers in the Earth's crust and assumed that the layers must have been laid down gradually, which would of course take a long time under normal circumstances. But could the layers have been laid down rapidly? Noah's flood gives us a mechanism where sedimentary layers would have been laid down all over the Earth in a relatively short space of time. And we have modern evidence of exactly this happening, albeit on a much smaller scale. We've actually observed rapid formation of sedimentary layers. When Mount St. Helens in the USA erupted on the 18th of May 1980, one of the many surprising results was an 8-metre thick sedimentary deposit exposed on a cliff alongside the North Fork Tootle River. It's composed of finely layered sediment, and if we didn't know any better, could assume that it had been laid down layer by layer over long periods of time. Except we know that this whole deposit formed in just 3 hours because it was observed. Mount St. Helens eruption also demonstrated how canyons can be formed much faster than conventionally thought. The ongoing eruptions eroded the thick sediment dumped at the base of the volcano, producing channels and canyons. One of these channels, named Little Grand Canyon, had sidewalls up to 40 metres high and a small stream running through it. Someone seeing that canyon might conclude that it was eroded slowly by the small creek running through it over many hundreds or thousands of years. However, the formation of this canyon was documented. It was carved by a mud flow on a single day, on the 19th of March, 1982. So the creek did not cause the canyon caused the creek. Other canyons on the flanks of the volcano show that it's not just softer material that can be eroded quickly. Lewitt Canyon, which is over 30 metres deep, was gouged in part through old, hard volcanic rock called andesite by mudflows in just a few months in the second half of 1980. So we have plenty of evidence that sedimentary layers can form quickly and can be eroded very quickly also. The real Grand Canyon is another amazing example where we can clearly see the various rock layers. You may not be aware this is powerful evidence for rapid deposition of sedimentary rock. See how the lines between the layers are very flat and sharp. These lines supposedly represent gaps in time of millions of years. But think about it. If those surfaces had in fact been exposed for millions of years before the next one was laid down, they wouldn't be flat at all. They would be heavily eroded by weather, tree roots, animal burrows. This picture shows the sharp, flat contact line between the Coconino sandstone above and the Hermit Shale below. There is supposed to be a 10 million year interval between these two layers of the Grand Canyon, but this contact can be seen extending for hundreds of kilometres with no sign of erosion between the layers. This is strong evidence that they were laid down rapidly. So while the idea of the Earth being around 6,000 years old may seem radical when we're constantly bombarded with millions of years, in fact, the majority of the scientific evidence indicates that the Earth is young, not millions of years old. So we've already looked at the geological evidence supporting the creation account in the Bible. Before we look at some more evidence, I just need to explain something about science. Not all types of science are equal. When people think of science, they tend to think of what we call operational science. Operational or experimental science is repeatable, it's measurable, there are well-defined laws that accurately predict the outcome. There's not much debate about this kind of science. It's the sort of science that gives us cell phones and microwave ovens and rockets. Generally speaking, this type of science provides us with lots of beneficial technology, and it leads people to respect what scientists say. But when we talk about evolution or anything that happened in the past, this is not operational science. What we're dealing with here is historical or forensic science. This is not really repeatable or measurable because we weren't there. We can't repeat the Big Bang as an experiment or the spontaneous origin of life. We don't know the exact conditions or environment. We should remember what God said to Job. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Some evidence will be available to us today, but it will be interpreted by a human. Both evolution and creation fall into this second category. So to reiterate, operational science deals with the present, it's repeatable, it's observable. This is the sort of science that underpins aviation, where there's no place for speculation or philosophical influences. It has to work. Note also that no one has ever found a conflict between the Bible and experimentation in operational science. But historical science, which is what we're discussing today, deals with the past. It's not observable, and it's not repeatable. It's an important distinction to make. And this is where worldviews really come into play. This explains why there can be such different explanations for the same evidence. Both evolutionists and creationists are observing exactly the same data or evidence, but coming to very different conclusions because of their different worldviews. One more thing about science. Science is investigative by nature. Ideas change as we learn more. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's how it should be. But God's word doesn't change. It never has, and it never will. And it doesn't need to change, because it's true. So never be tempted to place scientific thought above God's word. So let's take a look at some more evidence. First up, fossils. Fossils are presented as evidence for evolution, but actually they give fantastic support to the Bible's history. We'll look at how fossils are formed. A story that we've probably all been told, and you'll find with a quick Google search, is that an animal dies in or ends up in a body of water, it sinks to the bottom. Over millions of years it's gradually covered by layers of sediment. Eventually it becomes a fossil, which may be discovered when the sedimentary rock erodes away. Does that sound reasonable? It does actually, until you think about what happens in real life. In real life, a dead animal in a marine environment doesn't just sit there on the bottom untouched for years while sediment gradually covers it up. It's immediately set upon by the local carnivore club, who tear it apart and scatter the remains. It certainly doesn't remain in one piece long enough for sediment to cover it. Recent experiments have shown that even in the absence of predators, a body in water will disintegrate rather than remain in one piece. In reality, the only way to create a fossil is complete and rapid burial of the dead animal, excluding oxygen and preventing carnivores from making a meal of it. And millions of fossils have been found all over the world in rock laid down by water. Can you think of a historical event that might explain the rapid and complete burial of millions of animals all over the earth? Relax, it's not a trick question. The global flood of Noah's day provides the ideal explanation. You need to understand that Noah's flood was not just a benign raising of the water level after a lot of rain. This was an incredibly violent and catastrophic event. There was lots of volcanic and tectonic activity. It reshaped the surface of the whole planet. There would have been sediment flows on a massive scale all over the earth, well able to drown, bury and fossilise millions of animals. Other pieces of evidence that support this explanation of drowning and rapid burial are fossils that appear like a snapshot in time, showing animals like this fish in the middle of eating his lunch, or giving birth, like this ichthyosaur. I've heard of long labours, but millions of years? I don't think so. This is not what we would expect from a slow and gradual process. Also of interest is the arched back posture of many fossils that we now know is evidence of death by drowning. We have a real fossil for you to have a look at this evening. It's a Phacops trilobite, which is an extinct marine arthropod, and this particular specimen is called Doug. And the detailed preservation of Doug is evidence that he was rapidly buried before scavengers could get to him. He was very likely fossilised during Noah's flood about 4,500 years ago. So you can touch something today that was very likely walking around as Noah loaded up the ark. There are many other ways in which the fossil record supports the Bible's version of events. The next piece of evidence I want to look at is genetics and mutations in particular. This is another area where the two histories are completely opposed. According to the evolutionary version, we have evolved uphill from simple life forms to more complex, so we're supposedly getting better over time. The Bible, however, indicates that at the very beginning, Adam and Eve were genetically pure. After they disobeyed God and the whole of creation was cursed, mutations began to increase to the point where now around 100 additional new mutations are added per person every generation. What are mutations? Mutations are changes in our DNA. Most commonly they are errors that occur when our DNA is being copied. Mutations are not good. They're responsible for thousands of inherited diseases and cancer. So if we inherit 100 new mutations every generation, as well as the existing mutations already present in our family line, we're not improving. We're actually going downhill. The modern discovery of genetic entropy, that we are carrying an ever-increasing number of mutations, is exactly the opposite of the evolutionary story, but aligns perfectly with the Bible that tells us that our genetic golden age was in the past, at the beginning. We're now degrading, or going downhill. And we see this as the number of mutations increases in each successive generation. So if you're a fan of shows like X-Men, I'm sorry to break it to you, mutations don't give us superpowers. They give us diseases. This is also powerful evidence for the shorter biblical time frame, because at the rate mutations are increasing in us, the human race would become extinct many times over if we had in fact been around for a million years. Evolutionary geneticist Alexei Kondrashov asked, why aren't we dead 100 times over? This overall downward trend is also strongly supported by the second law of thermodynamics. If you want to know more about that one, look it up on creation.com. There's so much more evidence available in all the scientific disciplines that supports the Bible's history. If you want to see lots more evidence like this, check out the resource tables when we finish. Or go to creation.com. You'll be amazed at the wealth of information available there. I hope you're beginning to see that armed with a bit of information, a few key concepts, it's very easy to get equipped with answers to the commonly asked questions about creation and evolution. So I want to ask a really important question. Are you willing to get equipped so that you're able to respond to questions about your faith? Are you willing to equip your family with answers to the questions that we know come up all the time? Questions about carbon dating, dinosaurs, missing links, 8 men, how did all the animals fit on the ark, who was Cain's wife, how did the different races arise, how could a loving God allow suffering? People are looking for solid answers. There are far too many testimonies of people walking away from their faith because they couldn't get answers to these questions and they were told, you just need to believe. Back to Peter, who told us to always be prepared with answers. This is the reason that the Creation Ministries speakers lug around lots of books and DVDs and magazines and pamphlets, so that you can do your own investigating, so that you can get equipped. So that you can hear the side of the story that you're not going to hear in most classrooms or on the Discovery Channel. So that you can hear from real scientists who've got real degrees from secular universities who have been involved in real research. Scientists who have found that the biblical history is by far the best fit in explaining our universe and everything in it. I want to be very clear here, we're not providing resources to make money. We're a not-for-profit ministry. The primary aim of Creation Ministries is to help you get equipped with information and tools, able to show that God's word is true and trustworthy. If I could borrow from a colleague and put this in culinary terms, I would suggest to you that this talk is nothing more than an appetizer. The main meal is out there. Don't underestimate the impact that you can have by getting hold of good information, digesting it, and passing it on. There is a battle going on over the hearts and minds of our families and friends, and we need to be armed. Probably the most effective means to share this information is through Creation Magazine. I'm one of many people who would say that this magazine has changed my life. This powerful resource is issued 4 times per year. It's always visually stunning. It's suitable for a wide age range. There's always a kids section. It carries no paid advertising. It's completely full of useful information. It's a great way to keep informed about the latest issues and discoveries. Creation Ministries received many testimonies of the life-changing impact of this magazine. For example, a young scientist called Sonia had rejected Christianity, but a colleague both memorised and photocopied Creation magazine articles and shared them with her for over 2 years. She says, the process was interesting, that once I realised that creation could have happened, thereby removing my evolutionary foundation and replacing it with a creation foundation, I then found it easy to accept the entire gospel message. By passing on a copy or even subscribing for someone else, you could be instrumental in that kind of change in their life. How amazing would that be? Additionally, the hard copy subscription to Creation magazine now includes the digital version, which you can access on up to 5 devices. No steak knives, I'm sorry. But wait, there is actually more. If you subscribe for 1 year, you get a free back issue, and a 3-year subscription will give you the free back issue and 2 sleeved DVDs. One's called Rapid Rocks, which gives lots of geological evidence for a global flood. The other is the Fallout DVD I mentioned earlier about university and our young people leaving the church. This family magazine gives God the glory and gives you the answers to defend your faith. Another sign-up sheet's going to circulate now for those who wish to receive the Creation magazine. Really encourage you to do so if you don't already receive this amazing resource. Just fill out both parts of the sign-up sheet, tear off the stub and bring it to the resource table afterwards to collect your free gifts. I'm not exaggerating when I describe this magazine as life-changing. Many people continue to testify to that. Next, I'll highlight just a few of the other resources available. Creation Ministries' most popular book is the Creation Answers book, which carries the answers to more than 60 of the most commonly asked questions about creation, evolution, and the book of Genesis. All the different questions I listed before are answered in this resource, and many more. In my opinion, this is a must for every coffee table, great to have sitting around as a handy resource. Virtually every question that would be asked in a forum like this has already been answered in the Creation Answers book. And pretty much any challenge that's thrown at you by a skeptic is covered in an understandable way. We carry child-friendly books as well. The Please Nana series include Please Nana, Who is God? And Please Nana, What is Death? These deal with difficult concepts in a child-friendly style. And the children's book pack is really good value. 5 titles reduced from $90 to $54. Next, Refuting Evolution is a powerful book that deals with the main arguments for evolution used in schools and universities. Now maybe you have concerns about young people struggling to do well at school in evolutionary topics if they learn about biblical creation. What we find is actually the opposite. One of our speakers reports, a couple of years ago, a young Facebook friend commented that he'd been reading creation stuff for years and it was a lot of fun. Matthew went on to say, I've actually found that I'm acing biology, specifically evolution, because I seem to know more about it than my teachers. Matthew was excelling in his studies because he understood the scientific concepts. I hope you can see that exposure to this information really works, and it's not hard to find. The biblical explanation has such power, not only to explain what we see around us, but as people see that it makes sense, they're drawn towards Jesus and salvation. And ultimately, that's what it's all about. There are many DVDs as well covering topics like why is there so much suffering if God created a very good world? Dinosaurs, an amazing witnessing tool supporting the Bible. And biology, I've found this to be one of the most exciting areas as we discover more and more amazing things. Geology, astronomy, many more. Today is a great opportunity for you because these resources aren't available in schools or libraries, not even in many Christian bookshops. And finally, another reminder about the website, creation.com. All of this has been produced so that you and your family can get informed, equipped, excited about the truth of the Bible, and able to confidently deal with any questions that come your way. I'm living proof that you don't need to be a scientist to get a good understanding of these issues. People like you and I can really impact our culture. So to round it all off, I want to return to the 3 big questions we considered at the beginning. Where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going next? Remember how our answers to questions 2 and 3 depend on our answer to question 1. Well, if the Bible is correct about what it tells us regarding question 1, that we were deliberately designed, created by an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God, then it's only sensible that we look at questions 2 and 3 and consider, what does the Bible say about them? Regarding the question, why am I here? The Bible, which is described as a love letter from God, all the way through, tells us that God created us to be the recipients of His love, and that we were designed to love Him back and to know Him intimately, and to live a life of purpose, fulfillment, and excitement. Regarding the question, where am I going next? The Bible also gives us a very clear answer. Remember how good the world was before the entry of death and suffering brought on by sin? God promises restoration to a similar state, but even better, the complete removal of all pain, suffering, disease, and death in a place of intense joy and peace in His close presence forever. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? Adam and Eve had the choice of obeying God and remaining in a perfectly good paradise, or rejecting Him and experiencing the pain and suffering that was never intended for them. We all face that same choice today. Jesus, when He died on the cross, He reversed the effects of Adam's disobedience, and He made a way, the only way, for us to be reunited with God now and into eternity. The Bible describes how sin entered the world due to the actions of one man, the first Adam, and also how sin and death were defeated completely by the actions of one man, the last Adam, Jesus. We can't earn our way into heaven by being good. We'll never be good enough. We need to respond to Jesus. If this is something you haven't done yet, I really encourage you to keep searching, keep asking, keep investigating. So to close, I want to suggest to you that the Bible is completely consistent with what we observe in the world around us. It is not opposed by science, it's true. And we can trust it with our lives. Returning once again to the challenge in 1 Peter 3 to always be prepared. This is so easy for us today. There's so much good information available. I really encourage you to have a look at the resources available afterwards. Find something you can take away and digest at your leisure. Just don't forget the last part of 1 Peter 3 that counsels us to talk to people with gentleness and respect. This is such an exciting era for Christians. As more and more scientific discoveries are made that so powerfully support what God has said all along. Again, I just encourage you to keep learning, keep getting better prepared to answer the questions and challenges that will come your way. Don't be this guy. I'll be available afterwards if there are issues or questions you want to talk to, or if you prefer, talk to your church leadership. Asking questions is a really healthy habit. And if this has whetted your appetite, I regularly run an 8-week course where we look at these issues and many others in a bit more depth. Always be prepared.